Ash and Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike.
Ash, let's start with you. The Roundtable has reinforced a message that's been coming from Merrill Lynch research about going up in quality in the U.S. equity space. So let's talk about specific investment guidance in that asset class.
Our message, Michael, is consistent with RIC and research in the sense that we take sector guidance and tactical guidance from them, but then we have the burden of doing that in a portfolio context. So the four persistent messages from us to advisors in the last 4 weeks, for the matter of the last 8 weeks, has been one, total diversification, not partial. You could get away with partial in up markets, but now the burden of total diversification is not just to get the alpha, but to limit downside capture. Rebalancing. Our advisors embrace it, but implied in that is the belief that there is mean reversion, and they understand that. And two, that you need to have an asset allocation to rebalance too. So if there are gaps in rebalancing, we encourage them to go and fix that to get that going. Three is a dividend outlay. Here again, we go back to the RIC and research and take guidance in dividends. Companies that are cash rich, that can fund their short-term working capital needs, do not have to depend on credit markets, and also have the cash to pay and also grow dividends and buy back shares. That's been our advice. And finally, if you have all three, rebalancing, diversification, dividend income, you then have the liberty or the comfort level of including maybe a few what we call high tracking, high conviction managers, high tracking error managers, who can seek the alpha, not being confined to any benchmark, and sort of balance the overall defensive posture with a somewhat of an aggressive posture. Implementation, it's so intuitive to look at a UMA UDP to do just that, because it fulfills all the best practices of portfolio construction, specifically the UDP for large growth. They have two managers in there, Clearbridge and Winslow. They both seek growth, albeit slightly differently. Winslow does it from a very traditional momentum growth and conservative growth stance. Clearbridge does it stock by stock, sector by sector, but albeit with the same purpose of getting high quality dividend growth type managers into the portfolio too. For those of us in the audience who are PIA advisors who seek and have an appetite for single managers, Wellington is a manager that also attempts to get alpha from the growth space, but through a quantitative approach. And then you come down the list at the dividend strategies. Eagle Dividend is a very dividend-centric manager. Fayez Sarofim, a mega cap blue chip manager, which by default has a dividend overlay to the strategy, is right for this season. And to broaden the whole income situation is MLPs and closed-end MLPs. We share the conviction with the MLP analyst from research who's constructive in the MLP space. Tortoise Energy and Tortoise Capital would be our choices in that respect.
Excellent. Now, another aspect of diversification is being global, right? Being globally diversified. So let's turn to the non-U.S. equity space and talk about implementation there.
Michael, you can essentially take a RIC and research's domestic U.S. footprint and guidance and template that in the international theater. So the same rules apply: quality, defensiveness, cash-rich companies, with a couple of other nuances. The nuance being, look and be sensitive to those international companies that are not over-dependent on the U.S. consumer, one. Two, look beyond country selection to sector selection, stock selection, so the whole revisitation of fundamentals in the international space. And three, if there is a conviction among our advisors for the dollar to be strong, then the bias is towards ADRs to implement that space. Once again, the intuitive implementation is the UMA UDP in the international sector. We have a completion portfolio that has 3 mutual funds, but they're put together in a very methodical way. Thornburg, Euro-Pacific, and Julius Baer. And then the single manager space, JP Morgan does a very good job of sector picking and stock picking in the international arena, and MFS International, classic top-down, bottom-up manager, once again, sector-specific to fulfill our themes in the international space.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ash. Almost any well-diversified portfolio that our clients have has fixed income. And the dimensions that I think about when we turn to fixed income are sector, quality, and positioning on the curve. So what kind of implementation guidance would you offer to FAs around those issues?
Well, to pick up on Ash's comments, we've talked a lot about balancing the risks in fixed income with the risks in equities and how that fits in the overall portfolio. That is the art of portfolio construction, is aligning those risks. So what may seem important in this environment to us is to offer guidance that keeps those risks aligned. What it tends to mean is for clients that have very large risky exposures in equities, where Ash has suggested those prime messages around diversification carry through, we want to balance those out with risks in the fixed income space that are relatively straightforward and simple and don't offer a lot of variance around some of the factors you talked about. So one example for taxable managers that I know our analysts like very well that fits this theme of balancing the risks in fixed income, keeping them modest while balancing that component on the equity side is Lord Abbett. Lord Abbett, limited duration consults manager in particular. Very strong performance year to date. That's been the case for limited duration managers. They do have a style that is somewhat opportunistic, but their overarching philosophy is to just execute, not get too cute or not get too far away from their core approach in terms of the fixed income component. That's led to good results this year. We think a manager like that offers a strong complement to far more diversified equity portfolios in this environment.
Excellent. Now, final question. I want to turn to a category that clearly is only appropriate for qualified clients and qualified financial advisors, and that's alternative investments. Known for opportunity, but also known for diversification. What's our guidance there?
So with respect to alternative investments, as you've highlighted, it's really for the qualified clients, but we see more and more advisors looking to complement their existing fixed income and equity portfolios. And what we observe, at least on the alternative investment side, is that there are a range of choices that offer very good relative risk profiles, as well as the potential for some absolute returns. Our guidance there is centered on a few things. The first is to have diversification across alternatives, just like we do in equities as well as fixed income. Now, it will feel more complex to clients, but that portfolio construction element, balancing the risks of individual managers and approaches, is critical. What it means is we've looked at some of the verticals that have been launched, whether it's the long-short, some of the event-driven, but importantly, the systematic momentum strategy that we like to complement the other strategies in the alternative component. Now, not to get too high on performance, but the notion there is that we do see trend-following strategies doing very well in the alternative space. Some of the commodity trading advisors, systematic momentum in particular, up double digits year to date through October.
Excellent. Well, Ash and Chris, both of you, thank you very much for joining us today. As we wrap this up, let me ask you to remember 3 things. Number 1, be diversified. Number 2, rebalance. And number 3, implement these themes in a portfolio context. This specific guidance and much more is available in the Roundtable Implementation Guide, which is available on the Business Daily and IMG websites, as well as the Advice and Guidance Resource Center. Thank you.